Welcome to Office 2016 video number 40. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about Access 2016 and how to build queries. Now, queries are when we get to ask questions of the data set and return useful information. We're going to see these 15 amazing examples. We'll see and logical test queries or logical tests, parameter queries, contains queries. We'll see how to group by. We'll see how to create formulas or expressions. And we'll even see how to create a query from multiple tables simultaneously. Now, we want to go over to our class website. Over here at our class website, you can click on the link below the video to get to this. If you followed along with video 39, in this video, we created the database tables, relationships, and so on. If you have that file, just use that file for this video. If you don't have that, then simply download Woodencraft's database finished after video 39 and use that. Now, here's our Access database, 2 tables, 2 forms. If we double click in the navigation pane, our products table, we can see we have a number of fields and a number of records with our products. Now, what we're going to do is build queries. Now, what is a query? It's simply a question we ask of the data set. Really, it's a synonym for data analysis. Here's our raw data, and we're going to ask a question to get useful information. Now, the first question we're going to ask is, please show me the description column and the sell price column, and then sort the sell price ascending. We might want something like this at our kiosk, printed out and laminated so we have the prices. Now, we're going to close this table, and we're going to create our very first query. Going over to the Create tab. And just like with our tables, we're going to create a query using Design View. So Query Design View. Now, immediately, it opens up without a name. Down here is the query grid. And it will always ask us, which tables do you want to ask a question of? Now, it says Show Table up here. So I'm simply going to double-click Products. And just like that, if I close this and pull down the corner, I can even move this to the side. Just like that, we get a field list. We're allowed to ask questions of the fields in the product table. Now, I'm going to come down to the bottom part. This is the query grid. I'm going to point to the middle, and when I see that cursor, I'm going to click and drag. Now, these columns here are where we drag fields. And then field table, that will be for us, we'll just have 2 fields. We can then sort, choose whether or not to show it, and this is where we build our criteria. What do we want to see in the column? What conditions are on the column? We can use and logical test or logical tests, or other logical tests also. Now, our goal is to show description. So I'm going to double-click that from the field list. And sure enough, it puts the field down in our query grid, description field in the products table. And by default, it's show this column. Now, just to show you that even this basic double-clicking a field, that's a type of query. If I go over to results, and I'm not going to use the run button, I'm going to use the data sheet view or design view to follow our convention from earlier in the class. If I click on data sheet view, I could see the answer. This is the answer to our question. Our question was simple. Hey, show me description column. Now I'm going to go back to design view. That's a toggle there. We also need sell price. So I'm going to double click sell price. And just like that, it shows it. If I come up in view, that is a question. It's, hey, show description and sell price. Now, we might come and view this here. So right on the surface of the data sheet view, we can change the column width. I see that cursor, so I can click and drag. Oftentimes, though, with our query, we later build reports, and then we print out the reports. Now, I'm going to go back down to design view because we have one last task. I need to click in the sort row for the sell price column. Click the drop down and say ascending. Now I can go look. And sure enough, there is my final query result. I wanted to see description, sell price, and sell price sorted from smallest to biggest. Now I want to Control S because query 1 is not a good name. Control S. And I'm going to call this something like description and sell price. Now I can click OK. And look at that. We have our first query. Now I'm going to come over and close this. And just like we saw earlier, if I want to change a price in the products table, I'm going to use the form, double-click products. If I want to change the price, so Barnyard's Friends is really $1. Remember, that's raw data. So all I have to do is close this. It's already automatically double-click in the products table. We can see 1 right there. I'm going to close this. But of course, a query automatically updates. So if I double-click to open this, it doesn't update because this is sell price. I changed cost. Luckily, I can come over to products, double-click. The cost was really $27. I meant to change the sell price. We're going to change it to $1. Notice it totally obeyed me. I changed cost and everything updated. Of course, what I was looking at wasn't pointing to the cost column. But now that raw data will automatically show up if I double-click our query. And there it is, sorted at the top, Barnyard Friends. That is quite awesome in Access. Any query we create will automatically reflect any changes in the raw data. Now I'm going to close this, go back to products table, and the sell price really isn't $1, it's $50. And close this. All right, so that's our first query. Double-click products table. I might ask another question. I might ask the question, hey, please show me all the records for the supplier SC. So I'm going to close this table and go over to Create, Queries, Query Design. There's my Show Tables. I'm asking a question of the products table, so I double-click that. Pull this down. Pull up the bottom grid. And I want to show all fields. Now, you can actually double-click this to show all fields, but then you can't add criteria to particular fields. So we're not going to use that. I want all these. I don't want to double-click product ID, then description. I want to highlight all of them. So I'm going to click on the top one. And like we have done so many times in this class, before clicking on the last one, I hold Shift and I click. Now I can simply drag, and I'm going to drag it not to the second or third column. I want to drag it to the first column. And instantly, all of the fields are listed. Now, we want to see all of the records for supplier code. So we come to the supplier code column. And notice criteria. So all I have to do is in this row right here, type SC. Now, in Access and Excel, as we've talked about, they are not case sensitive. So I could type capital SC. I could type little sc. I'm going to type capital SC. Either way you go. Now when I click View, I can see just the records for SC. Now I want to Control S, and I'm going to call this Products from SC. We might call this Product Records from SC if you wanted to. Click OK. And there is our second query. Now I'm going to close this query. And we want to do our third query. I want to come over, double-click Products, and our question this time is please show all records when the on-hand units are greater than or equal to 10. So we should get exactly 2 records. I'm going to close this. Come over to Create, Queries, Query Design, double-click Products, close, pull up the grid, expose the full field list. I want to see everything, so I'm going to click on the first, Shift, click on the last, drag to the first column, come over to On Hand. This is the criteria row, and I'm going to type greater than or equal to 10. That is our condition. When I click View, just like that, I see only the records where On Hand is greater than or equal to 10. Control S. I'm going to name it something like On Hand greater than or equal to 10. Click OK. This might be a useful query, right? Customer wants to buy 10. You need to know which products are available. Now I'm going to close this. We have 3 queries. Now, if we look at our products table, the question we're going to ask of the raw data this time is, please find any products where the sell price is less than $10 and the on hand is greater than or equal to 8. Maybe a customer comes in and has 8 kids at a party but doesn't want to spend more than $10. We're going to close that table, create, design, show our table products, close, click the corner, expose that field list, drag the grid up. Now all I want is description, on hand. I'm using control and sell price. I use the control key to select items not next to each other. I should have probably just double clicked, but you can do this also. You can click and drag, and just like that, we get those 3 fields. Now we have 2 columns, on hand and sell price, and each has a condition. Sell price. I need to very carefully type less than 10. Now I come over to on hand, greater than or equal to 8. Now we have 2 conditions, and they're on the same row. That means this is an and logical test. We can only show a record if on hand is greater than or equal to 8 and the sell price is less than 10. Now, I want you to notice that the conditions or criteria for this and logical test are on the same row. Now, over in Excel, if we were doing advanced filter, which we did not do in this Business 216 class, but which we will do in the class after this, Business 218, when you do an and logical test in advanced filter, you do exactly the same thing. You put the conditions or criteria on the same row. So when the conditions or criteria right here are on the same row, that means an and logical test. Now when I click View, we can clearly see that for each record, both tests are met. On hand is greater than or equal to 8, and sell price is less than 10. Now we need to save this query, Control S, and we're going to name this something like sell price less than or equal to $10 and on hand greater than or equal to 8. Click OK. And there we have our 4th query. Now I'm going to close this. And we want to create our next query. And the question we're going to ask is, show us the records where sell price is between $5 and $10. So we're going to close this table. Go up to Create, Design, Query Design, double-click Products Table, click Close, pull up the grid, pull down the field list, and we want to see all fields. So click on the first, hold Shift, click on the last, drag to the first column. Now we need to come over to sell price. And what we said was an and logical test is on the same row. Well, over in Excel, if we were doing advanced filter, we'd have to repeat the sell price column twice. But over here, as we saw when we created the table with an and logical test, we can actually use the and operator. Not only that, but we can use between operator also. So I can type out. And in fact, I'm going to increase the column width just a bit here. There's the cursor. I'm going to click and drag. And right in the criteria row, I'm going to type between space 5 and 10. Now, when I hit Tab, we can see it properly capitalizes both between and and. But that will work as a logical test in Access. Now we can go over to View, and there we see the sell price. We only get the products that are between $5 and $10. Control S, and we're going to name this price between $5 and $10. And by the way, when it says between over here, the 5 and the 10, that means the lower limit and the upper limit are included. I'm going to click OK. There we can see our 5th query. Now I'm going to close this and test that. I'm going to come over to Products Form, double click. Actually, I'm going to change the window size on this Access database. Hopefully, the window size will work a little bit better so we can see down here also. Now, I want to change the sell price for our first product, Barnyard Friends. We're going to change it temporarily to 10. Now, I want to come down here and go to the next record, and we're going to change blocks in box. Sell price is going to be 5. Now, if that between is working, meaning including the lower and the upper, then both of these products will be included in that query. I'm going to close the form, come over to price between 5 and 10, double click, and sure enough, there's the 5, blocks in box, and there's the Barnyard Friends 10. I'm going to close the query object, go back to the products form, change the sell price for Barnyard Friends to 50. Next record, selling price 27. Close this form, go over to our query, double click, and there it is updated. All right, we're going to close the query. Now, what if you didn't want to include the 5 and 10? Let's try something. Let's copy this since it has mostly what I want. Click in the navigation pane. I'm going to use my keyboard Control-C, and then I'm going to use the keyboard for paste, Control-V. Now, it doesn't want a repeat query name, so it says copy of price between. I'm going to change it. Sell price greater than 5 and less than 10 when I click OK. Now, when I open this, right-click Design View. Actually, if I double-click and open it, it's exactly the same because we haven't changed the criteria underneath. But I can come up to Views, Design, and over here, instead of between, I'm simply going to say greater than 5 and less than 10. When I hit Tab, it'll properly get rid of that space I had there on the capital A and D. Now, when I click View, I'm getting the same exact thing. But when I close this and I want to save this, come over to Products, for example, and we're just going to change the lower end. So Barnyard Friends is going to be 5. Let's close the form. I want to open up Between. And of course, that one will include that $5. Sell price right there. But sell price greater than 5 and less than 10, when I double click, it's not included. If we go and look underneath, that's exactly what we did when we created a data validation and logical test rule in the products table for cost. Here we're doing it in a query. But in both cases, we actually typed out comparative operator number and then the word and then another comparative operator and number. Now I'm going to pull down the grid here just a little bit. Control-S, we can close this. Now that was query number 5 and 6. Now we want to do query number 7. And actually, let me show you a cool trick. If I was in a business, I'd keep them right like this because the description is what we want to look at when we're opening it. But just to keep this consistent, when I go and save this and let you download this to check, I'm actually going to number all of these. Description and sell price was our first query. So I'm simply going to click on it. We can rename it, either right-click, rename, or the keyboard, just as we used in Windows Explorer for renaming files and folder, F2. I'm going to use the Home key, 01, space, and Enter. I'm going to down arrow to Products, Records from SC, F2 Home, 02, space, and Enter. Down arrow to On Hand greater than or equal to 10, F2 Home, 03, space, and Enter. So we're totally allowed to rename queries. All right, now we want to create our 7th query. Create Queries, Query Design. Double-click Products, close the show table, pull down the field list. And we want to look at what an OR logical test looks like. We want to show all fields, so product ID, shift, wholesale, retail. Click and drag to the first column. We want to show supplier code, either SC Toys or AP Toys. So down in the criteria row, notice it says OR. It reminds you when you're doing OR, you put them on different rows. Actually, as we mentioned earlier, if we're doing advanced filter or criteria over in Excel, goes on different rows. So I'm simply going to type SC down arrow AP. I have my two conditions on different rows. That means it'll look through this supplier code column and ask the question, are you SC or are you AP? Anytime it gets a true for either one, it will show that record. I'm going to go up to View and click, and there it is, SC or AP. Control S, I'm going to name this something like supplier code toy records, SC or AP. Click OK. Oops, I forgot to number it. I'm going to close it before I rename it. Click F2 home 07 space and enter. All right, now we'd like to see how to do formulas. And our first formula, like we think of it over in Excel, will be calculate the average price for all of our products. If I look at the products table, I simply want to take the average of the sell price. I'm going to close this. We're going to go up to Create, Queries, Query Design, double-click Products, Close Show Table, pull down the field list, double-click Sell Price. And now I see Field, Table, Sort, Show, and Criteria rows, but I don't see a row for formulas. Now there's a big button up here. You can click that sigma, or you can right-click and point to totals. Just like over in Excel, sigma is just the symbol for we're going to make some calculation. Now, we'll talk about what group by means in just a second, but for the time being, I simply want to notice that there's sum, add, min, max. And notice they're not exactly the same names as they are over in Excel. But if I click average, that's it. That will now, for the sales price column, calculate the average. Now, when I click View, it's going to be strange because it's going to give us a single answer. That is the answer for what is the average price of all of our sell prices. I move the column width, Control S. I'm going to call this something like average sell price and click OK. Now, I want to close this query, and I want to copy this. Oops, I forgot again. F2 home. This one's going to be 08 space and enter. Now I want to copy this. So Control C, Control V. Now this time I'm going to try and remember to say 09. And we're going to come to the end. Average sell price by supplier. Now really I should change this to group by, because that is the database term for when you're making a calculation with condition or criteria. So I'm going to click OK, and we'll see what we mean. Now, right-click, Design View. Now, we have our total row with average, but we want to drag supplier code or double-click and send it down. And when I double-click, watch what it does. It groups by. What this tells the query to do is please take one of each supplier code and calculate the average. You can think of this like a pivot table. When we drag supplier code down to the rows area, we get a unique list, and then we do average calculation on sell price. Group by means group the prices for each supplier together and then calculate the average. And so when we come up and we view, there it is, supplier code, boom, 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 a unique list of the actual supplier codes from our products table, and there are the average prices. Now, we could go down underneath. We could actually highlight this whole column, and watch this. I'm going to click and drag to move it before the sell price. Now, when I click View, there we see like a pivot table, boom, boom, boom. There's our unique list of items, and there is our average price. I'm going to Control S, close this. I want to copy this because now I want to actually find the min and max for each supplier. So I select it, Control C, Control V. I'm going to remember to call this 10. And we're going to say, instead of average, min and max, sell price, group by supplier. Click OK. Now I can come down, right-click, Design View. I'm going to change this calculation from average to min. and I'm going to double click cell price. Come over to where it says group by. That's the total row. Click that drop down, and we're going to say max. Now when I click view, there it is. Unique list of supplier code, min and max. Sort of like a pivot table, but over here in Access. Control S, we're going to close this. Now, we actually want to do an official formula over here in Access. We'll get to do 2 of them in our next 2 queries. Now, our first formula, and we'll go look at the products table, we need to calculate inventory value. And inventory value will be on hand times cost. Now, when we create a formula in Access, we actually have to take the field names, and in our case, we're going to multiply on hand field times the cost field. And we'll have to put the field name in square brackets. If you remember over in Excel, when we used the Excel table feature, there we saw field names in square brackets. All right, I'm going to close this. Create, queries, query and design, double click products, close show table, expand the product field list. And we want description, so I'm going to double click because we want the name of each product. And then here's where we're going to create our formula. Now, we could expand the column here and type out our formula right there, or we can right click and point to zoom. And in the zoom canvas here, we can create our formula. Now, there's 2 parts. We're always going to have to create the name of the column or the field, then type a colon to separate the name and then the formula. So the name of this column is simply going to be inventory value, and then I type a colon. That colon says everything before is the new name of this column or field. Everything after is the formula. Now remember, we want cost times on hand. Open square brackets, on hand, close square bracket. And remember what we said when we created the table. If I misspell the field in the table, I better misspell it everywhere else in the database. So since I'm referring to that column and I didn't spell it wrong, I'm going to spell it correctly. On hand, that is a field in square brackets. Now I multiply open square brackets times the name of the cost field, close square brackets. That's our formula. When I click OK, I can see the formula down there. When I come up and click View, there's our inventory value. I can change the column width. Control S, and I'm going to give it a smart name like inventory value. Click OK. Now I want to go back underneath, and if you misspell something, it's going to think you want something called a parameter query. So if you accidentally misspell it and come up and click View, it wants you to do a parameter query. And our query number 15 will be a parameter query, and we'll see how that works. But if you get this while you're typing out your formula, it means you misspelled your field name. I'm going to click Cancel, backspace on that S, click View, and there it is. And of course, that's totally dynamic. 2 videos ago, we changed the prices in our form and watched how our inventory value updated. I'm going to close this. I'm going to say, yes, I want to save it. Now, our second formula, create, queries, query design, product table. We want to calculate gross profit for each product. So I'm going to double-click description, come down to the second field, right-click zoom. We're going to type gross profit, colon, square bracket, and gross profit is sell price minus cost. Sell price, close square bracket, minus open square bracket, cost, close square bracket. That formula will work if we have our colon, which means everything before is the name of our field. Everything after is fields, and we spelled them right. So when I click OK, I'm going to increase the column width, come over to View. There it is. Uh-oh. It looks like we changed the raw data in one of our examples and forgot to change it back. We'll go fix that in just a moment. Now I want to save this, Control S, gross profit for each product, and click OK. Now I'm going to close this and go look at Barnyard Friends. Down in our forms, double click, and sure enough, there's that $5. This was actually $50. Now when I enter that number, close this, go back to, and look at that. I am not remembering to name these. F2 home, that's going to be 12 space enter. Space enter. Now I'm going to hit enter to open up inventory value, and there's the correct inventory value. So it's totally dynamic, this inventory value query. I'm going to close this. Now we have 3 more queries, and the next query, and we'll go look at the products table, is sometimes you want to do a contains query. I want to search for any product that contains the word rail. So there's a railway bridge, midget railroad. So we want to search for all the railroad toys. I'm going to close the table, create query design, products table. I want to show all the fields. So I highlight all the fields, drag them down to the first column, and I come over to description. And there's a wild card that we're going to use, and it's an asterisk. So I asterisk rail asterisk. Now, asterisk stands for 0 or more characters. That means when I type asterisk rail asterisk, I can find the word rail, and it would be returned in our query. I could find railroad, because that asterisk says 0 or more characters, and road is 4 characters. Or I could find midget railroad. And this wildcard asterisk also is over in Excel. And it always stands for 0 or more characters. If you wanted a single character, you'd use the question mark. Now let's test this query. I'm going to click View. And just like that, it's totally working. Control S, products that contain rail, click OK. I'm going to close this. And we have 2 more queries. And here's an awesome query. We're going to ask a question of both tables. Now I want to open up products, and I want to return all of the products that have on hand less than 5. If there's on hand less than 5, I need to reorder that product. Now if I'm going to reorder, I would like to know what the cost is. I definitely want the product ID and description, but I also need, from supplier data, I need to know the name of the person and the telephone number. That means I'm pulling data from both tables. The reason that this will work is because there's a relationship. For example, products. There's a product, Barnyard Friends 3. But notice this record has SC. And through the relationship, when I pull cost, on-hand description, and product ID, because there's a relationship for SC, and the query also asks for first name and telephone number, it'll totally know to pull Sue and telephone number for that SC. If there wasn't a relationship between these 2 tables, then we couldn't pull data from both tables. All right, I'm going to close both tables. We're going to go over to Create, Queries, Query Design, double-click Products, double-click Supplier Data, close Show Tables. And look at that. It even shows us the relationship, a one-to-many relationship. Now I'm going to select Product ID. And before I click on Cost, I'm holding Shift. I'm going to click and drag down to the first column. Then I'm going to come over and double-click last name. This is so amazing. And telephone number. Now, right now, if I click Data View, there's no condition or criteria. So it just shows me product ID, description, on-hand cost, name, and telephone number. That might be something useful, but we want to limit it. We don't want anything to show up that has on-hand 5 or above. So I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to say, please, on-hand, you have to be less than 5. Click View, and there's our useful information. We can print this out. And in fact, in our next video, we'll build a report based on this. And then we have our description, how many we have on hand, the cost, the name, and the telephone number. Control S. And we're going to call this something smart like product reorder phone list. All right, I'm going to click OK. Close this query. Our last query is going to be a parameter query. Now, if we look at product records from SC and go underneath and look, we see that this is for SC. But this would be a useful query if I could, when I open it, it asks me which supplier code I would like. So I'm going to close this query with O2 product records selected. I'm going to Control C, Control V, and call it records by supplier parameter query. Click OK. Now I can see it's no good. I just can't seem to number them while I'm creating them. So I will F2 each one of these, and this will be 15, enter. All right, I'm going to move the width of this. Right click. Actually, if we double click it, we see we get the SC. But now let's go underneath to design. And we simply come down here. And in the criteria, remember earlier we had square brackets. And if we type anything here that is not a field name, it'll turn into a parameter query. So I'm going to type something polite because that'll be the message. It'll say enter supplier code. And now when I come over to view, how cool is that? I'm going to type AP and click OK. And sure enough, there are the AP records. Now I'm going to Control S, close this, because now this is a parameter query. When I double click and open it, it will always ask me, hey, I want to see Sue Chin. So I type SC, and there it is. All right, that was a lot about queries. We saw a basic just pull two columns and sort. We saw how to add conditions or criteria. We did conditions and criteria with comparative operators. We did an AND logical test. Between, we saw how to exclude the upper and lower limit for a between logical test. We did an OR logical test. We did aggregate calculations, aggregate for the overall sales price, aggregate where we did group by supplier. We did min and max, group by supplier. We calculated formulas or expressions. We did inventory value, gross profit. We even did a contains query. And then we did a query based on two tables, created a reorder phone list, and then our last query was a parameter query. Now, that is the bulk of the Access videos. We actually have two more videos. We'll see how to create a basic report or two, clicking the report button. And in our final query, we'll see how to export data from Access. Now, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun, including two more short Access videos. All right, we'll see you next video.